feeling? How are you?
Welcome to Nested, an original podcast from the White Wren featuring intersected stories about love, life at home, and everything in between. Our mission is to inspire and encourage you in prioritizing tangible interactions that take place within the four walls of your family home. Each episode, we talk to interesting people who have a heart for making time for the things that matter most in life. Let's dive into this episode.
We'll find our way back home. We'll find our way back home. No, we'll never have to walk alone. We'll find our way back.
For this episode, Brent Deitrich, publisher at the White Wren, sits down to chat with Kiley Williams of Kiley Ann Photography.
Well, I'm glad that you joined us today, and glad that we could sit down and chat a little bit about your business and kind of what has gotten you to this place and a little bit of your history. Yeah, so let's jump in and tell me about kind of how you got started in what you're doing today with your photography business, Kiley.
Well, first of all, Brent, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today. Just a quick introduction. My name's Kiley Williams. I'm the owner of Kiley Ann Photography. I'm a wedding and portrait photographer based out of Columbia, Missouri. And while my business is based out of Columbia, Missouri, I frequently serve the St. Louis and Kansas City area, and I'm open to traveling as well. I feel like my business, I probably have a story similar to other photographers, as I didn't mean to start this business. It truly just kind of happened. I feel like I've had a camera in my hand ever since I was a little girl, whenever my brother gifted me my very first Barbie film camera, and I was begging my parents for more. But the pivotal moment was in high school whenever I took a graphic design class. My art teacher, Miss Walker, she really told us that, to have good graphic design, you need good photos. And so one of the assignments was she gave us a camera and we took it home and we took pictures of our friends and family. And that was whenever it really stuck. I was like, wow, I really like this. And so it took a few years for me to start a business, but opportunities came up and there was a photographer in my area who was asking for help for second shooting weddings. And I was like, oh, I would love to try that. And so after that, friends and family really just asked for photos, and it just kind of turned into a business in 2019.
That's cool. I wonder do you still have the Barbie film camera?
I do.
Do you?
I do. I think it's somewhere like nested away in my parents', storage, but
That's funny.
I do still have it.
I think I didn't actually know there was one, but that's so funny that it was like a film camera for kids, essentially, right? Because, yeah, that's wild. Because now the closest thing that we have to that is like an Instax, but kids are just taking pictures on cell phones. So that's kind of fun.
I need to dig it out because I think it's probably 35 millimeter film, but I'm a film photographer now. And so it's really interesting just to carry that all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it is. That's cool. So, it's interesting that you say about, because I do photography as well, in addition to the White Wren, and it was sort of the same thing for me. It was like starting a photography business wasn't necessarily something I had ever that's what I want to do in life. It just sort of happened due to some other circumstances. But then looking back over life, you can kind of be like, oh yeah, these are the things that led me to this point. Like you see, how different interests or whatever kind of all dovetail together. So that's cool. So you started in 2019. Was that your first self-employment, like your first business that you'd created, or had you done anything before that?
It was the first business that I created. So I really started in 2017 with weddings and then starting things like portraits of friends and family. But in 2019, it was the first wedding that I ever booked under my business. And then, I also did seniors and engagement sessions and weddings. And now the focus is really on weddings, but no business beforehand.
Did you work for anybody else, or that was literally your first thing?
No, I worked for other companies. So I really started my business in college, and so right
Hmm.
after college, I worked for the state of Missouri, and then eventually went full time with my business. But I had some other odds and end jobs before that. But really, you know this is my full time job and what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. I feel like for those of us that are creatives, it's hard to work for other people, honestly. I know so many people that just like kind of started their own thing like right after high school. That's why I was wondering, if that was the kind of your first job, your first business is like working for yourself, because I feel like that's a common thread among creatives that we kind of just jump in with both feet and then try to figure it out as we go.
Yes, I will say that I really do enjoy working for myself.
Yeah,
Just kind of
yeah.
being your own boss, it's a different ballgame.
I know I've had a few corporate environments recently that I've had myself in where I was doing a job for a bigger thing, and it was just like that whole, I don't know, that whole vibe, that whole feeling that was there. I was like, ugh, I don't think I could do this every day. I don't think I could work at a place like this. Yeah. So the Barbie film camera kind of was the start. Do you feel like that was um, like an inspiration for your style, that when you started you were like, oh, I want to keep doing film? Or did you see other things, other work around that you were like, this really resonates with me, this is the direction I want to go? Or how did that kind of lead in?
Yeah, so I would say that my style is true to life. And so since I am a film photographer, it really does inspire my style. So I'm a hybrid shooter where I photograph with a film camera and a digital camera. And so I'm really trying to emulate the film. I love the look of Fuji. Unfortunately, I don't shoot with Fuji just because of it being, low supply. I really do love the greens and it just looks so natural.
Yeah, it's low supply, it's discontinued. It's gone.
I know it's discontinued, but I feel like photographers are still selling it on Facebook pages and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely been a shift, kind of in that whole industry over the last couple of years, because I feel like there was this big renaissance of film, and then like half the film in the world got discontinued, and now people are just like, eh. And there's really good emulations now too. Like there's just stuff that you can't really tell the difference. So it's come a long way. It's pretty wild. What did you go to college for? Does it tie into your business as well?
So I went to business school. So
Hmm.
I graduated with a marketing degree with an emphasis in entrepreneurship, a few minors, so for data analytics and customer development. So it wasn't about photography. So I really wanted to. Well, one, I didn't know that I was going to start a photography business whenever I chose this degree, but I knew that it was versatile. But it really does play well into being an entrepreneur because I love having the business foundation. And then I've
Hmm.
always been creative and I've always, had the eye for art. And so it just kind of played really well together.
Yeah, I think the business side is honestly what most people struggle with. I think that's the thing for a lot of creatives, is like you have the creative art side of it, but then the actual running of the business is not always done the best way. So that's good to have that foundation for sure.
I do agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said true to life is kind of what inspires you. What got you into, like you're doing predominantly weddings and high school seniors, right? And
Yes.
families too.
So really not families yet. I've toyed around
Okay.
with adding families for past clients, but the main focus is weddings and then a handful of seniors too.
Yeah. What got you into the senior market, and how do you feel about that?
So I think seniors were the foundation of my business. You
Oh,
don't just
really?
jump right into weddings. At least I
Mm-hmm.
don't think you should. I think that you should really try to shadow other photographers and get your feet wet before taking someone's, the most important day of their life and capturing those moments. And so seniors were really my foundation. It's how I learned how to photograph and really learned the settings of my camera and learned how light worked. And so they really do hold a special place in my heart.
Hmm.
And I love working with them. And it's funny because I've even photographed some of my seniors' weddings. And so it's fun to see them kind of progress over time. But I think it's really fun to capture them, and it's completely different. And it just kind of keeps me on my toes.
You know, you've been in it for a little while when the people that you started with, you're photographing like the later points in their life.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I have that with I'm actually at the point now where there's like children that I photographed as babies, well, toddlers that are, you know, they're getting married or their cousins are getting married or whatever, like people that I know. And I'm like, whew, that does not feel that long
That's
ago.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Time really does go by fast.
Yeah. Do you so I looked at some of your senior photography and it's like very similar to kind of your wedding look, as far as like the images and stuff. Do you feel um like what do you think kids these days are attracted to as far as like images? Because I feel like and kind of going back to like the film thing, I feel like high schoolers and college kids are like into film these days, but they like view it very differently than people did like 6 7 years ago. So how do you see that in that part of your business?
Yeah. Seniors are, it's really interesting. And it's something that, I want to keep up to date, and I want to hear feedback because things do rapidly change, especially since they're young and there's trends on social media. And so I don't know. I think that seniors are really into technology. And so while I'm still photographer, it's important to capture them in a way that represents their personalities. But I also think capturing behind the scene footage, or even, I don't offer video services, but giving them something to show on social media, to put on TikTok, to put on Instagram, just kind of keeping up with the times. I think that classic portraiture is important. Those photos are what are going to go on their walls, their parents' walls, maybe like something that they'll look back in the future. But it's also fun to incorporate, new poses and something fun that represents their personality. And then also incorporating props, whether they, whatever they're interested in, whether that be music or, a sport, those kinds of things as well.
Do you get like I feel like, and this is another thing of like just cycles coming around. So I feel like right now we're in this era where like film is still cool, but Flash has also made a comeback. Do you what do you see in your market with that?
So I'm a natural light photographer, so I don't really offer the flash, but I do agree. I think it's something that's trendy. I think more
Hmm.
for my business, I'm really trying to focus on something that's timeless and going to last the test of time. So I don't offer film, or I don't offer flash for the senior portraits, but I do see it often
Hmm.
on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking with somebody the other day. I don't remember who it was anymore, but they were talking about a younger kid. It was like their nephew or niece or something like that, and they were going to if I remember the story right, it was like they were going to buy them a camera, but they were like, don't buy me a new one, like we can just go to the thrift store and get like a power shot, you know, like a point and shoot, something that took really crappy pictures, and that was what they wanted. I have a theory about it,
Tell me
and
about it. What's your theory?
so my theory about kind of this generational thing, because I keep seeing this over and over again, is that it's not so much the technology behind it. They're not part of it is like a vintage attraction, which to kids now, like things from the 90s are vintage, sadly. Um, even some of the early 2000s are now vintage. But I think that it's because like I think the way social media, and that's a whole other topic of like how social media has affected children. But I think that people see so much, like kids see so much like polished perfection on social media that they want something that feels less polished. And so they look at what they consider vintage, which is like what we would consider the first point and shoot type cameras, and they're not very perfect. They're not very high res, but they look at that and they're like, it gives them the feels in the same way that like an older generation would get the feels by like listening to music on vinyl. They're like, oh, that feels more real. It feels like from my childhood, or maybe it's not even from their childhood. Maybe it's beyond the childhood. But I feel like it's like kind of that thirst for like something that feels more authentic, because social media for a while was so like hyper curated, and now it's become a little bit more of trending towards more authenticity, more sharing real moments and stuff like that. Less polished perfection. That's my theory. That's
I
why I
think
think they want those old crappy cameras again.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I see a lot of individuals using the point and shoot cameras and the disposable film cameras. I think it's
Hmm.
and even the camcorders. I see those at weddings too. A lot of guests like doing behind the scenes or the bridal party. It's funny. It's
Yeah, yeah,
it's a completely different look. But I can that theory makes sense to me, Brent.
yeah. It's interesting. It's just funny to see, like, I mean, we talk about trends coming around, but it's interesting to see also like what we once considered new become like vintage, or give people the feels to. That process is interesting to see develop. But I think that anybody with photography, I mean, um, it's a very emotional thing. It's a, it's something that you want to do because it makes you feel good, or looking back on those pictures gives you a certain feel. So I feel like just the whole concept behind like weddings and photography and all that is very emotionally driven. So
Oh, definitely.
yeah. So pivoting to weddings then for a little bit, because we kind of talked about seniors for a little while here. Um, do you so you're in Missouri, you said you do some there and you travel around. What do you think your like your target bride and your target couple, like what are they drawn to in your business, do you think?
A lot of couples come to me saying that they're interested in timeless portraiture. I also hear the word candid a lot, which is interesting. I think maybe my approach to weddings is a little bit of both. I'll be there whenever you need me. I want to give you structure, whether that be for your portraits or maybe it's during family formals whenever you have a big group of people and we need to adjust hair or button up, all of those things. But also, I want to be a fly on the wall and capture the moments that you don't even realize are happening. I think that a lot
Hmm.
of my couples are drawn to that. They want to someone to photograph them hugging their grandparent or laughing with their guest and just kind of like capturing the entire day with unique perspective. It's not all perfect.
Hmm. And you have to be very fast to capture those moments, right?
You really have to have your head on a swivel to capture
Hmm.
those moments because they just happen out of nowhere. I think that with the more experience, you can kind of anticipate when those moments are going to happen. Let's say that the couple is just walked down the aisle and their bridal party is surrounding them and giving them a hug. I can expect that. But there are definitely moments that just happen out of nowhere and you kind of just have to be ready.
Yeah, for sure. How do you think, since you've started your business in 2019, what do you think of the way that the wedding industry has shifted since COVID? And do you think that like what do you see there in your industry with that?
It's been interesting. I feel like in the beginning, it was right after COVID, there was a really big rush of weddings and everyone just wanted to get married. And now it's kind of a shift of we're kind of in the catch up mode because couples naturally, I can't remember the statistic, but they date for a certain amount of time. And so I feel like there has been kind of a shift. And maybe like we're starting to play catch up now. It's been really interesting to watch that happen
Hmm.
since COVID.
Yeah. Do you feel like I feel like here in North Carolina, there's a big trend towards a lot of smaller weddings. Do you see that as well?
I
Like
agree.
people just like cutting bridal parties out, like just scaling back in a big way from how it used to be.
I agree with that. I do think that weddings are getting to be a little bit more intimate.
Hmm.
Couples are really being selective on who they're choosing for their wedding so that they can give an experience to a small guest list, which, is different from before COVID, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if it will be. Um, like I wonder if it will be something that will carry for like another 3 to 5 years and then trend back, or if it will kind of stay that way for a little bit longer. I don't know. I feel like things change so quickly in the industry, and so it'll be interesting to see whether that trend. I definitely feel like there's now I've had a couple or seen a couple where people they wanted it to be small or started out kind of small and then it kind of grew still a little bit bigger than they wanted. But there's definitely been a lot, and even stuff that we get in submissions at the White Wren, you can see a lot of like backyard ceremonies and like micro weddings and stuff like that being submitted. Still really beautiful. I mean, obviously it tells a couple story, and it's not as much for them to deal with. But do you get a lot of those types as well? Like, are you seeing a lot of people doing that type of wedding now?
So I think it really depends on where the wedding is at. I am from a small
Hmm.
town in Missouri, and so I feel like the couples maybe from the small towns have bigger weddings, but the
Mm,
couples in cities tend to have smaller weddings. And so I have done backyard weddings, especially right in the middle of COVID. I did a lot of backyard weddings because,
mhm.
couples were only inviting maybe 15 to 20 family members. And so I have seen
Yeah,
that, but I would say that my couples probably stay around 150 to maybe a few more for their guest list.
that's interesting that you. I would think it would be the opposite way, that like people in a small town would have a small wedding and the city people would have a bigger wedding. So that's interesting that it's kind of flip flopped.
No, I feel, well, I'm from a really small town, Brent. Like, there are no stoplights in my small town. And so I feel like it's just kind of something where you bring everyone in. And so it is crazy, the number of guests. It's just really a community event. And so it's interesting to see the shift in bigger cities, at least for me.
Yeah, they're like they've grown up in a quieter thing, so they want their wedding to be a big shebang when it happens.
I also think it's hard to cut people from your guest list whenever you're related to so many people and you have so many friends and family in the community. So I totally understand.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So do you have venues in your town, or what's the closest kind of city market that you're in?
So now the closest city market is where I'm located in Columbia, but I do find myself traveling about 2 hours to the St. Louis and Kansas City area, which are flooded with venues. So I
Mhm.
feel like there's a really good variety of venues within my area.
Yeah. Yes, I have been to Missouri a few times. Kind of a funny story that I have for Missouri. I guess, well, we were in southern Missouri, even down into northern Arkansas. I think when I was
Okay.
little, I lived in Pennsylvania, and my parents had this idea that they were going to buy a farm in Missouri, and so just on a whim, they like left one night and drove there overnight, and and we went and toured like a couple farms with this real estate dude, and went all over down there. But they never did end up buying anything there. They just had this idea that they were going to like move to the Midwest and homestead and get land cheap, and so
That's
that's
so interesting.
that's
Do
kind
they
of
have
my.
a background in farming?
I mean, we did, yeah. We had kind of a smallish farm, um, couple acres of our own, and then some other land that belonged to my grandfather and some other people that we. But yeah, we had goats and pigs, and um, we made hay and had a little thing going on. But yeah,
Well, that makes
so
sense. And it's not just off it like out of a whim. It kind of makes sense.
not entirely, but we knew nobody in Missouri. Like it would have
Okay.
been like we would just been moving there by ourselves. There was no family there. There was nobody else that we knew.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it was kind of funny, but it was pretty. It was different from Pennsylvania because the mountains were different. Where I grew up in Pennsylvania, everything is in like long valleys, so the mountain ranges are like very long and stretched out. And Missouri is a lot more rolling hills and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So yeah. Well, what besides photography, what are some other things that you like to do? Is there anything like in your community or like with family, or what are your side interests? How do you kind of
So
balance it out? Because I know it's important to like balance work and other things too.
I think that being an entrepreneur, it's really you really have to schedule your time out, and you have to be careful about
Hmm.
what you're doing because it can be very time consuming, and it's important to carve out time for what's important to you. So I would say that family is really important to me, and that also translates into my business and what I'm talking to my couples about. But spending time with my family, I have a big family with 9 nieces and nephews. And so I really like to spend time with them. I have other passions, but it's really, balancing work and family, I would say.
Hmm. Nice. How many siblings do you have? You have nine nieces and nephews?
So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. Both of my parents were married before, and then they both had
Okay.
2 children. So that's four. And then they got married again later in their lives. And so they had my brother and I. And so my oldest brother, there's quite the age gap. And so my oldest brother is 20 years older than me. So it's just
Okay.
kind of like a big family. And, all of them have children. And it's really fun.
Yeah. My wife is one of eight, and her youngest sister is about 18 years younger than her. So we have a lot of big family gatherings. There's like 10, I think 10 grandchildren now. So a lot of little ones running around. The family gatherings are always like chaotic and loud and crazy, but it's
But
fun.
But I think that's what makes it fun is having
Yeah.
everyone together, and it really makes some good memories.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's how I grew up actually too. My mom was in a very large family as well. She had a lot of brothers and sisters, so I always had a ton of cousins. A lot of good memories at grandma's house kind of thing. And I think that's what we, even with what the stories and stuff that we're trying to convey in the White Wren, and kind of our mission in our heart is that sense of like family togetherness, being together, making memories, the things that happen inside the walls of your home. So it's always been something that's really resonated with me my whole life. My wife and I often say, like, you can have friends will sometimes come and go, but your family is typically around forever. So if you can make them your best friends too, then you're set because
I
they
think
can't get
that's
rid
so
of you
true.
usually.
Yeah, usually not.
Yeah, yeah. So
Well, I love
that's
that.
cool.
I love that the White Run, their mission, that's really important.
Yeah. What's a favorite? Do you have like a favorite story or a favorite wedding or something that's happened in your last couple years of running your own business that's like really sticks in your head?
That's a great question, Brent. I don't know if I have one specific story that's my favorite, but I think that what I'm doing day in and day out is memorable to me because truly I am meeting with families early in the stages of planning their weddings and I'm watching their vision come to life. And then, I am able to document such an important part of their life.
Hmm.
And something that is really important to me is one, to document their day or their event, but also to be able to give them the opportunity to take these images beyond the computer screen and give them something tangible to hold. Because, like we're talking about family, it's important to have something tangible so that you can pass this down to your children, to your grandchildren, and it can really be like a centerpiece and a talking point in your family at a gathering.
Yeah,
So I would say that's probably the most memorable part of my business.
yeah, I agree. We've talked about that on some other episodes and with some other people as well, of kind of this digital dark ages that we're living in right now, where like, are things going to get passed down to future generations, and how are they going to get passed down? Is it in a way that's easy to view? Is it in a way that, is it just going to be stuck? Is it just going to be hard drives somewhere that like children are going to unearth one day, and maybe they will or won't power on? Like, how do we carry these memories down? I think that's a really worthwhile conversation to have. And I think, I mean, I'm guilty of it. Like, there's a lot of digital photos of my family that aren't printed out, and we're always saying we should do those like a yearly photo book or like something like that. But you have to be real intentional about it, um, to get to that kind of an archive.
It's true. And technology is so rapidly changing. It's like, will our children or grandchildren be able to open the hard drive? What kind
Hmm.
of technology will they have? And so I think just printing these photos is so important.
Hmm.
I mean, I tell my couples all the time, do you really want to have your wedding images just on your phone with a random screenshot, maybe of a Pinterest recipe that you're planning on making later that night? Probably not. Like, I really do think it is about being intentional. And like you said, even for your family photos, just going through once a year and printing these off and putting them on your shelf.
Hmm. I think there's so many now that that's why it becomes overwhelming for people too. Like before we would just take a few pictures of like key moments in life, and now we're taking selfies of everything every day. And so um, it kind of feels like maybe we're documenting a lot of things that aren't as important. And so when you think about things like printing a book of the year, it's like, oh my gosh, so many pictures,
It
right?
can be
Like,
really overwhelming.
yeah, yeah, it could be. Do you have like a, well, I guess you're just, I mean, you're more promoting like people. I was gonna say, do you have like a thing that you tell people like this is a way to manage that, but you're kind of dealing with wedding photos and not necessarily as much family photos either.
I think that it's more manageable whenever it's just one event. I completely understand. Even on my phone, I have so many photos of myself, my family, and of course, my clients. But
Hmm.
whenever you're talking about a wedding or even a family session, it can be a little bit more manageable because it's like, okay, we're getting our family photos taken once a year, and then just being really intentional to take those photos, and put them in a book. But I
Hmm.
also think that even the moments on your phone of just, capturing a random moment of your child, that's also really important. And maybe that could be something more like a scrapbook, or just like a little bit less, it's a little bit different from a wedding album, I would say.
Hmm.
But it's still important to have those moments printed, and bound, I think is important too. I know that I just went through my grandparents' wedding, or not their wedding, I just went through their photos, and it's just like endless amounts of loose prints, and it's a little
Mm,
overwhelming.
yeah, yeah. Are they like the kind with the sticky pages?
They're just all kinds of photos. I
Yeah.
mean, my grandparents were older. I mean, my grandma was 94 whenever she passed away, so they're like the older traditional portraits, and then there's
Hmm.
also other ones as well.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy that like our grandparents were, I mean, they're probably a lot of black and whites, right? Like
Yes,
color
yeah,
film didn't come out until what, like the 60s, 50s maybe? I don't know. I can't
yeah.
remember
It's
exactly, but
interesting.
like a lot of our grandparents' pictures are in black and white, and that's kind of crazy too that not only in technology we've evolved from like going to black and white film to color film, but then adding digital and all the advancements of that into it as well.
It's really crazy to look at it,
Yeah.
to look at the timeline and how fast things are changing.
Hmm. I feel like we're in one of the fastest changing periods in human history.
I
Like
think
the
so.
last 100 years have been like crazy, insane.
It is. Yes, it's insane. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. It's crazy.
Yeah. I remember when uh, video chatting on a computer first became a thing. And I remember thinking in my head, man, it would be cool if you could do this on a phone because you could take it with you. And it was like a couple years later, it was done.
And everything's on
It
your
was like
phone.
there. Yeah. It was like it only took a couple years and they were like video chat on your phone now. I was
It's
like,
everything. It's your camera, it's your calculator. It's everything. It's just on
hmm,
one device. It's crazy.
yeah. Yeah. What do you what's your like daily carry camera, if you will? Mine is my iPhone, I'm not gonna lie. It's with
I
me
mean,
everywhere. But like what do you take with you everywhere for like memories?
probably my iPhone. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just more convenient as far as, family trips and trying to be more intentional, maybe a 35 millimeter camera, just something basic. But um, I would say for everything else, it's iPhone. But for client work, it's more like, you know, professional camera equipment.
Hmm. I started using every once in a while. I use like an app, like I think it's called Huji, the one that kind of makes it look like a on your phone like a disposable film camera, because then I don't feel like I need to edit it. I feel like it's like already done. My wife is really good about editing her photos. Like all the pictures she takes of the kids and stuff, she will eventually edit them in Lightroom Mobile on her phone with our same film presets that we use in our business. But I'm bad about that. Like I have lots of unedited photos on my iPhone. So
That's that's a lot of commitment. Wow,
yeah,
that's really
yeah,
cool that she does that.
yeah. She keeps after it really well. Her whole like camera roll is like a beautiful Instagram feed, and mine is just like it's random screenshots and all kinds of crap. Like it's just it's an unedited iPhone pictures. She'll get on my case like, why don't you send that to me so I can edit it? I'm like, okay.
That's funny. I think that
Yeah.
it's hard whenever for your job you're editing everything and
Hmm.
it's so professional and I'm a very organized person, but for my personal camera roll, I feel like I'm more on your side, Brent, where it's just kind of the camera roll probably isn't as organized as my business.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a couple years back I did a thing where you could like sync your photos to Amazon for like a backup. And so then we have a Fire TV in the living room, and so it'll use those as like the screensaver for the living room. And every once in a while, there'll just be like the randomest picture up there, or like something that's not even a picture. Like it'll just be like,
A
you know,
screenshot or
a
something.
screenshot of a note or something. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So that's really really weird. What do you what's your equipment that you like to use for
So
your
for
work
my
stuff?
Yeah, for my film camera, I use a Contax. So it's a 120 millimeter film camera. And then for the digital side, I use a Canon R6. And then I use prime lenses mostly. I try to keep it really simple for weddings because, there's not a lot of time to do things. And I just want to keep it as simple as possible. So I feel like my main lens is a 50 millimeter. I also have a 35. And then for ceremonies, a 70 to 200. And then, of course, a macro for detail photos. But I'm trying
Hmm.
to keep that 50 on my camera as much as possible just because it's beautiful and also it's the same focal length as my film camera.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good range for sure.
What about you? What do you like?
I use a 50 a lot as well in photography. A couple years, I had Canon for a long time, and then I switched to Sony. Well, I didn't switch. I still have the Canon cameras, but I added a Sony a couple years back, probably in 2020, an A7 III, and so now it's mostly Sony and Canon, which I feel like complement each other well. And then too many film cameras to count. I don't even know. There's just a whole shelf full of them, all different kinds.
I
Um,
love that.
yeah, but I'm like, but I also have a lot of like I've got a fridge full of film that I don't want to use too. That's like old stuff, like peel apart film,
Uh-huh.
and that stuff is just like insane now. Like it's like $100 for like 8 shots. Like it's ridiculous. So
Yeah.
like the few packs that I have left, I love that camera. I loved using it for like just shots and like behind the scenes stuff. But it's like, how do you decide to take a picture that's going to cost you $15? Like
It's yeah.
just
Yeah,
one
it's hard to
shot.
let
Like
go.
I know. I'm like I don't know when to use these. I don't know when to use this stuff. I don't know what's the monumental occasion, or like what job is the right job. Like I don't know. So
Are you saving it for something personal or do you think for the business?
I don't
I don't
know
know.
that I don't know because that's the thing about the pack film too is it's like it's 8 shots or 10 shots or whatever, and like it's in the freezer, but once you put it in the camera, then you got to use it in a certain amount of time. Like you can't just let it sit in there for like a year either. So
Yeah.
I got to have 8 shots of something that I want to spend it on. So
You
I
need a
don't know.
plan. Yeah. You have to be
I need a
really
plan,
intentional.
but it also isn't doing me any good just sitting there indefinitely in the freezer or the fridge either. So you know, it's kind of just one of those things. You gotta figure it out, bite the bullet at some point, and just use it, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's kind of how photographers feel about their stock of Fuji. They're like, when do I use this?
Yeah, yeah. I probably still have some in there. I haven't used Fuji in a little while, but um, yeah, I still have some somewhere banging around. So where do you see your business going in the next couple of years? What's your long term goals? Is it just you? Like it's just you doing primarily all the photography?
So it's just me for now. As far as long-term goals, I really want to stay in the wedding industry for a bit longer.
Hmm.
I think down the road, I think it would be really interesting to I want to like give my clients a continued experience, and so offering to photograph their families and really documenting their families all the way from the initial proposal or engagement to their wedding to newborn, maternity, newborn to their first year of life. I think that it would be really interesting to document them from start to finish,
Hmm.
and then also help them help them put it on their wall and create a story wall of their images, like a gallery wall. So I see that's really my focus right now is to continue with weddings and then offer that service,
Hmm.
and then potentially hiring an associate down the line too.
Yes. What's your how many weddings do you try to do or hope to do in a year's time? Like, do you kind of set a limit for yourself? I know it's hard right now, like with the economy and stuff. If somebody comes along and offers me money, I rarely turn them down these days. But
I would say probably no more than 25 weddings. I just want to give each client a unique experience. I want to dedicate enough time to each of them because no wedding is the same and no family session is the same. And so it's important to me to really dedicate time to each client, talking to them on planning calls and learning what they want their wedding to look like, what's their vision, what's their story, and then executing it.
hmm.
And I think that you can, yes, it's hard to turn down money as an entrepreneur, but it's also really important to give them a good experience.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's so much about service. It's the whole industry, like the whole wedding industry. I mean, it's just so much on service and experience, and even with being a photographer, it's like not that you don't need to know your photography stuff, but like you can take great pictures, but if you give people a bad experience or you don't communicate well or you're not organized or you're not good at staying on time, people won't remember the other stuff. It's
Right.
they get a better impression just by like how well you're managing things and interacting with people, I think. Which is also kind of an Achilles heel for creatives as well, because creatives tend to be predominantly introverted, and so you have a people facing business where you need to make people happy and feel good, and you're introverted on top of it. And so it's kind of it's a catch 22. Like you gotta kind of force out of that, I guess, to give people that experience.
No, exactly. I agree. I do feel like a lot of creatives are introverted. And then it's also going back to the business versus creative. It's like,
Hmm.
so it's really, you got to find the middle kind of.
Yeah. What do you use to how do you keep yourself on track that way as like an entrepreneur? Do you establish like hard boundaries for yourself, like these are business hours that I work inside of, or do you just try to kind of keep a 50-50 balance, or do you just live and breathe your work and that's all you do?
Oh man, Brent. So I feel like it would be very easy to live and breathe your work. I
Hmm.
have set boundaries since going full time. I really try to stick within my office hours because it can be consuming. And
Hmm.
like I said earlier in the episode, it's important to me to spend time with my family. And so if I answer emails and calls at all hours of the day, it's just not going to happen. And so I think that it's helpful to have technology helping me as well. I really rely on a CRM. I have automatic responses whenever, clients inquire or after certain things. And I think that's helpful, but I also think it's important to set boundaries in your business so that it's not consuming your life.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's I think that because like when you own it and you're invested in it, you're more passionate about it, and so you can easily just spend the whole day just going from one thing to the next, and trying to make it all successful. When you're working for somebody else, you're a little less invested. You're like, is it time to go home yet? Is it time to go home yet?
Don't
So
get me
it's
wrong, it's on my mind at all times. It's just trying to really create a divider between my
hmm.
business because there's always something that I could be doing to improve it. So it's really trying to divide personal and work.
Yeah, a never-ending to-do list.
Yes.
Do you how do you treat vacations? Like, are you able to? This is something that I have an issue with. Like a week long vacation. after like 4 days into it, I'm like, give me something to do. I gotta like do some work or do something. Do you feel that way too? Or are you able to like check out and like just chill for like a long period of time without thinking about your business too much?
No, I mean, I think my business is on my mind all of the time. I really try to separate it, but I agree with you. It's like at a certain point, I'm starting to think about what I need to do. I guess
Hmm.
it kind of depends on the vacation. Like last year, I went to France, and so I was incorporating my business in that vacation. It was kind of like I was taking photos, and then I was also, enjoying time with my family. So
Hmm.
kind of a mix. I think it depends.
Yeah. Yeah. A little work vacation. Good
For
tax write
sure.
off. Good tax write off.
Exactly, exactly.
Mix the business with the pleasure. Nice. Well, it's been good to talk to you. I feel like this has been fun getting to know a little bit more about your business. Just for the viewers, can you give everybody kind of your website URL where people can find you at, and also your social media handles?
Absolutely, Brent. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today. My business is Kiley Ann Photography, so you can find me on Instagram at Kiley Ann Photography. It's KILEYANN Photography, and then my website is just KileyAnnPhotography.com.
Well, we will look forward to sharing more of your work on the website and our socials as well. And appreciate you coming on and chatting with me for a little while to about your work.
Well, thank you so much.
Of course. All right.
Alrighty,
We'll talk soon.
talk to you later.
There's a place called home, a place called home.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Nested. You can keep up on all things White Wren on our website at whitewren.com or follow us on social media at The White Wren. Tune in again next time and have a wonderful day.
Oh, I've walked for miles and I've traded my time for adventure.